It's ReeferMEDness, the podcast, with Trevor and Kirk.
Through the marvels of technology, we are several kilometers apart, and yet we are talking through the interwebs again.
Actually, I'm a little closer than you might think. I'm in one of the more remote nursing stations in the province. However, I'm rather south. I'm actually just a little north of the White Shell.
Yeah, well, that's what you were saying. I grew up close to the White Shell, and I haven't been to the actual community you're in, but I have fished close by. It is a beautiful part of the province.
Yeah, so I think maybe 300-400 kilometers away from Dauphin.
Yeah, there's just definitely no roads that go here from here to there.
No, sir. No roads. Only helicopter. I have to get here by helicopter. So how are you doing, Trevor? I haven't seen you for, God, weeks.
Yeah, and in person, I don't even remember when.
I saw you in the parking lot.
Oh, that is true. I saw you in the parking lot of the pharmacy. So that's as close together as we've gotten in a while.
That's right. And yeah, that's about it. So I brought you a story that I think really works well with the opiate stories we had. We did Dr.
Grinspoon.
And then also you had the Tilray interview with
Philippe Lucas.
Yeah, which I thought was a fantastic episode. Well, I brought you a self-declared junkie.
Yes, Marc has a lot of experience.
Yes, he does. And my conversation with him was about an hour. I don't presume we're going to use all of the interview. There's some critical parts of it that I want to extract from it. I met this gentleman on Instagram. He is a listener to us. So hello out there, Marc. I'm assuming he's listening to us. Yeah. And I thank him for I guess, sparing himself and talking to us about his addiction issues, his substance disorder, abuse disorders, and it started very young, and he explains that in the story. And he bears his soul, man. The conversation, we go down several rabbit holes.
Yes.
And several. And the conversation sort of took different paths as we went. So I can't really say we were flowing. We just chatted. And I love those kind of interviews where we just chatted. And there's a couple of things I want people to sort of listen here. What we've got here is we've got a gentleman who is self-declared. He calls himself a junkie. And he actually describes and physically describes himself as a junkie. I've met some people with addiction issues in corrections. And this just gentleman in my conversation, he describes himself as one. He's spent time in corrections. He has spent time in living rough. He has spent time on the different sides of the law. This is all part of the conversation. He now is growing his own and using his homegrown cannabis as a way to help himself get off opiates. Now, he's also on the Methadone program. So, and that brings its own challenges, and he gets into that. So I found the conversations, well, as I do all of them. I love this podcast that we do, Trevor, by the way.
We get to talk to some fascinating people, don't we?
Yeah, and that's what I like about this. Every one of these podcasts for me is a Con Ed experience. Right, it definitely is a Con Ed experience, and as a nurse, Kirk was the nurse, and
Trevor
so
pharmacist.
One for me, this was an opportunity to spend an hour in a clinic room with a junkie and talk about cannabis. What did you think about the interview?
He is a challenging guy. You've probably dealt with more people with substance use disorder than I have, but as I think I've mentioned before on the podcast, our pharmacy we are part of a methadone program, a Suboxone program, so I talk to people with substance use disorder every day. Frankly, the people I talk to, kind of by the definition they're in the program, are doing relatively well. Everyone's got their problems, but most of them are housed and employed and in relationships, and life is might not be perfect, but moving along. He has been in much worse straits than that. So, yeah, we'll talk about it more in the wrap up. I have a lot of compassion for Marc, but I think it also just listen for how difficult it is to be a healthcare professional who specializes in addictions medicine, because people like Marc come with a lot of problems. Like there's a lot going on. Like you don't just suddenly wake up one day with a heroin addiction and that is your one problem. There is a lot going on, and just listen for that in Marc's story. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, and I know you're going, in the wrap up, you're going to explain a little bit more about methadone. This isn't really a story about the methadone program, but I think it's important to talk about what harm reduction is and cannabis's role in harm reduction.
Yeah.
And this is why I brought the story to you and wanted to bring it as a podcast, because this now brings a lived experience. And you were saying off camera, off mic, basically what this man is bringing to us is a lived experience and how cannabis is helping him. And he's by no means done his journey. He's still in the swing of it. So let's. Do you want to just go into the story?
Yeah, let's hear from Marc, and then I think we've got a bunch to say in follow-up, and yeah.
My name is Marc Heinrich. I go by Dilated Dank online on social media. I'm a craft cannabis farmer in Manitoba, Canada, and pretty much a lifelong junkie.
Okay.
And addict.
Okay. So you actually searched us out about a year ago, asking if your story would be of interest, and it very much is. As I explained to you, Trevor has been doing some studying on opiates from a PhD that's done by Tilray. And we've also got an MD that's talking about using it actively. I was just reading an article coming from Normal about how cannabis has helped people with addictions. So you know what? Marc, I'm just going to let you go. So why don't you explain to us what your story is, and I will try not to interrupt you.
Okay. So let's see here. I started doing drugs at a very, very early age. I found out I was adopted right as I was turning 13, and that kind of just flipped my whole worldview. I was raised in a very religious household, and so when I found out I was adopted and my parents had been lying to me my whole life, everything just flipped, and I was like, well, if they've been lying about that, what else have they been lying about? And at that point, I thought, if I smoked a joint, I could die. That's how drugs were presented to me. If you smoke a joint, you will become a heroin addict, and you might even die. So I think the first thing I did mushrooms before I smoked weed. Might have smoked hash before. But anyways, so I started going down the list of drugs and finding out that, these don't kill me. They actually make me feel good. And then fell into a pretty harsh addiction, first to cocaine for would have been 16 through 30. So for about 15 years, I was a pretty hardcore cocaine addict. I would have stints of sobriety here and there. And I was functioning for the most part, but in and out of jail, I guess not functioning, in and out of jail, would get a good job, have it for a couple of years, lose it. My resume looked really good, but my rap sheet looked about as good as my resume did. So it was a 50-50 shot most days. And then at 31, I discovered heroin, and it grabbed me by the balls in a big, big way. And I'll try not to go off on any tangents here, but even heroin, the way it grabbed me, had I known what heroin was, had there been any documentation, if Carl Hart had written his book 20 years ago, I wouldn't have been a heroin addict. We've just put so much on drugs that have nothing to do with drugs. There are safe ways to consume all of these substances. And what's made them unsafe is government prohibition and regulation. Well, regulation is making it a bit better now, but prohibition definitely exacerbated the problem. So anyways, I managed to get onto methadone after, I think, about 6 years in heroin addiction. And I've been on methadone. I'm still on it now. I've been on it going on 8 years, I think. And I was never told when I went on methadone that this was going to be for life. Like, chances are you're going to be on this for life. It wasn't until after the doctor prescribed it to me and I started talking to other people that they were like, oh yeah, I've been on it for 12 years. I've been on it for 20 years. I've been on it for 15 years. I've been on it for 6 years. Going to be on it for life. And then we started talking to the doctors. And as I started looking into it, I was like, this stuff is worse for me than heroin was. Like, if you want to get off methadone, it's like I have been actively trying to get off methadone for like the past 2-3 years, just tapering down, because they put you up to such a high dose that it's almost impossible to come down. And they don't tell you that when you want to quit methadone, if you get your life in order, if you get your head straight and your addiction under control and you want to get off methadone, it's almost impossible. Like, even when you get down, I'm now on 5 milligrams a day, and I'll often only take half a dose a day. So I'm between 2.5 to 5 milligrams a day. The last 6 times I've tried to cut my dose down like a milligram or two, I go into insane withdrawals immediately. So I have to go back up to 5 or 6, and then I come down for a week, and then I get bad withdrawals, and I'm back up. And they don't tell you that methadone has a 6-month withdrawal table. Like, you can have precipitated withdrawals for up to 6 months after going down to half a milligram from half to 0. And heroin has like a 4 to 7 day window.
Yeah.
So putting somebody on methadone to get them off heroin is the stupidest thing in the world. It makes no sense besides the fact that the government gives it to you. It would make way more sense to put people on a heroin maintenance program where you get pure pharmaceutical heroin and they taper you down slowly. Worst case scenario, they cut you off, you're in withdrawal for 3 days. Right now, if I can't get to the pharmacy, which the nearest one is 30 miles away from me, I have no vehicle and no license. So if I somehow don't arrange a ride every week to pick up my methadone and I miss 2 days, I get cut off with zero help and forced into a 6-month withdrawal that could almost kill me. Whereas heroin, if I was on a program and I missed it, worst case scenario, I'm going into withdrawal for a couple days, I shake it off and I'm back to work. So putting somebody on a substance that's worse than the substance they're on to get them off of it doesn't make any sense to me. And then so I started looking at natural ways to get off of it. And
Mark, I'm going to interrupt here.
Go ahead.
Did you grow up in the Just Say No, Nancy Reagan days of Just Say No and all that?
Yeah, I was born in 76.
Okay. All right. Just Say No was in the 80s, I think, wasn't it? So you were just a kid.
But that was on all my Saturday morning cartoons.
Right. So you went to the DARE program and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, they came through school. We saw all the videos with the egg cracking in the frying pan. But,
so if you started at 13, then by the time you reached your 20s, you're full into it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I got kicked out of the house fairly. I went to juvie and got kicked out of the house. So I was actively in the industry of drug production and sales for the majority of my life as well.
You weren't living rough, though. You were in the drug scene as an active participant, opposed to being somebody who was using and living on the streets. Yes.
It wasn't until a couple of years into the heroin that started, because it does take you over to that extent. Like I have been crying in a jail cell covered in sweat. Heroin does get a hold of you like that. It can be a very insidious drug.
So here, I'm going to break in here, Trevor, just talk a little bit about how we got into discussing what a functional heroin addict would look like. And essentially, after a few minutes of talking about that, I asked him what was it that triggered his need to get off heroin, that he wanted to kick his opiate habit. And I was surprised by his answer. What broke you to say, I want to get off this? I recognize I'm a junkie. I want to go and get help. So did you had a crisis? You hit bottom? Yeah.
Lack of supply.
Okay.
Plain and simple, lack of supply. The only time I ever had a problem with heroin was when I didn't have it.
Okay. All right.
I one of the best jobs I ever had, which was one of the shortest positions I ever held in my life as well. I got while I was a full heroin addict and lost like a week into it because I ran out of heroin. So it was just the situation we were in, the lack of finances that I had at the time. Finances were up and down. So, and then you'd have a good connection for a while, and then all of a sudden your connection goes to jail and you're left sick in the streets, basically. So that was what prompted me to say, I'm not going to be able to live my life. Every time I get a job, I lose it because I do great for a few weeks, but then I have a couple days where I don't have heroin, so I have to take time off work because I'm sick. And then an old friend said, why don't you get on methadone? Like, just get yourself on a low dose of methadone. You can still use, you'll still get high, but at least you won't get sick if you run out.
Right.
I'd never even heard of it before. So I was like, okay. And then we were on methadone for a while, and then I started looking into methadone and realizing that this was even worse than the heroin. And now I'm stuck on something that's going to take me the rest of my life to get off of, when at that point I had kicked heroin probably 6 times already.
Right.
Successfully by myself, in jail, or just locking the door and sweating it out for a few days. And so then I started looking for ways to get off of it. And I went down the iboga path, which is another natural remedy that is insane that nobody knows about. It's iboga. It's a natural root bark from Africa.
Okay.
And the concentrated version of it is called ibogaine.
I've got a dog too.
Yeah, I got 2. One's looking to get outside and play with the farmers, but
that's what my dog wants to do too.
So, but it's illegal in the U.S., but it's legal in Australia, Canada, Mexico, all over the place. And they've known about it forever. And it's a natural root bark. It's an extremely powerful hallucinogenic, and it causes ataxia. So when you take it, you all of a sudden you're paralyzed. You can't move for like 12 to 24 hours. You trip like crazy, like hallucinations that are unlike anything else. I've done every hallucinogen out there. This was unlike anything else. They were real hallucinations, but they were present where I was. Anyways, this iboga wipes all of your opiate receptors, all of them. I went from 40 milligrams of methadone a day to 0 in 1 day with no withdrawal whatsoever.
Okay.
When I told my methadone doctor, he didn't believe me. And he's like, there's no way. You would be dead. You can't go from 40 to 0. You can't do it in a week. You can't do it in a day. This is impossible. And I was like, I'm telling you. I did. I came out of it the next day. My wife was like, do you want your methadone? I said, pour it all down the sink. I don't need it. And I was clean for almost a year after that. But so that got me looking down that road. And then this time when I started to come down on my methadone, I had started hearing that cannabis and edibles could help. I didn't believe it at all. I'd tried using weed in times of withdrawal before, and it never seemed to do anything for me. I was like, it just doesn't make sense. Heroin is so powerful. Weed is weed. Like, yeah, we get some pretty powerful cannabis these days, but it's nowhere near as potent as heroin. So I just didn't see that it could be effective in any way. And then I started making my own edibles and realizing that with edibles, I could drastically reduce my methadone and take drops down that were significantly greater than anything I'd been able to do with any other help. And so I started tapering. I was at 180 milligrams, I think, 160 milligrams. I dropped in half to 80 in a week. 2 weeks later, I dropped to 40. 2 weeks later, I dropped to 20. And same thing. I hadn't told my doctor because as I was going down, I was aware that if this didn't work, I was going to need that methadone. Right. So I'd been saving it all at home and just taking half my dose and taking these high dose edibles with it. And then my doctor, when I finally went to my doctor and said, okay, you can take me down to 20. He's like, I can't take you down from 160 to 20. And I said, well, I'm already drinking that anyways. And he was, again, there's no way that you went down that fast on your own. And I said, yeah, but I've been eating 2,500 to 5,000 milligrams of cannabis a day. And he's like, no, you'd be dead. And I'm like, no, I'm obviously here talking to you. And I'm telling you, this is what I've been doing. 2,500 milligrams, I don't see that like that. You know, our patients, we start them at 5 milligrams for extreme pain and anxiety. And like the highest we go up is maybe 25 milligrams. There's just no way you're taking 2,500 milligrams. And that's to my point, or not to my point, but that's part of my point with this all. When I'm talking to other people about it is, our doctors have no idea 9 times out of 10 what they're talking about. And I often find that my pharmacist knows way more about what I should be doing and what I should be taking than my doctor.
So yeah. What put you back on methadone? Of course, your body started craving it?
No, I slipped and started doing heroin again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So methadone is great for only one thing. It gives you your life back. So it pulls you out of a 2 to 4 hour cycle, because I was doing up to a quarter to a half ounce of heroin a day. So I was needing to inject anywhere from a quarter gram to a half gram every 2 to 4 hours.
So by this time you're doing IV heroin?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
As well as smoking it?
Yeah. Well, by that point, I was mostly just shooting it. Once you do IV, it's very, very hard to backpedal on that.
So what's preventing you from going back to the Iboga, sorry.
The Iboga?
Iboga.
Cost, the ability to acquire it, and taking it. You can't take it when you're alone. My wife died last year, so I live alone now. Yeah, thank you. So it's one of those things where you need to have somebody there. You need to be, you have to have a babysitter basically. And I'm on such a low dose of methadone.
Okay.
The cannabis has been helping me come down really, really steeply. So I hope to be done with the methadone in a few months anyways.
Okay. And your doctor's online with this now? Do you have the same doctor you're dealing with?
Different doctor now.
Okay.
But she's in agreement with it. She doesn't understand it as well, though. When I tell her how much cannabis I take, she doesn't understand it, and it's the same thing from her. She's like, "There's no way you can't take that much. Like, you would be comatose." A lot of these doctors don't understand tolerance. They don't understand how quickly your tolerance can build up with something like that, and they don't have any data on it, I guess, either. So
these are specialist doctors. These are addiction doctors you're dealing with.
Yeah.
And are they encouraging the use of cannabis?
Not as much as they should, in my opinion.
Interesting.
Yeah. There's still a big stigma in addiction circles with any drug. Like they still see it as basically replacing it. They don't really see it as a medicine or an alternative. They see it as just adding one more drug to your repertoire. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to get through them sometimes. And because they've been trained in such an empirical way that unless they have a peer-reviewed study in front of them that's been signed off by 1,000 doctors, all the anecdotal evidence in the world doesn't mean anything to them. They don't even consider it. it's very frustrating at times.
And so let's get into your file a little bit. You're obviously an addict. You've had family doctors that assisted you in this, but you have to go to experts. So in your addiction with methadone, is that a family doctor or is it an addiction doctor?
It's an addiction doctor who works at a methadone clinic and is full time.
Oh, okay.
She just prescribes my methadone.
Okay.
And I think that's like she does other stuff, but that's basically all she does.
Okay.
And that's another problem is a lot of these doctors, it seems they're so like, do we not have general practitioners anymore? Are those gone?
Well, they're called family docs. They're out there.
Yeah.
But they tend to refer a lot. Yes. Okay. So Trevor, I'm going to break in here again. You hear I say to him, let's break into your file. And this is what I do. The next 15 minutes, we break into a more personal level of his file. So if this was a clinic room, I would most definitely ensure the door was shut and Marc and I would have a personal conversation. So that's what we did. What I learned is that his methadone doctor is in Winnipeg and his cannabis doctor is online. And as we can hear in his story, he's got experiences with drugs and cannabis, and he is self-medicating. In the closed door conversation, I offered him some suggestions on how he might be able to better navigate the health system so that he and doctors can work together on this project of helping him. So I'm going to start the conversation again where we get into him dosing himself and how he's dosing himself with cannabis. So let's go into there. 2,500 milligrams of cannabis.
To start.
So obviously you're growing your own.
Yes.
Yes, obviously. And you obviously have, in the years that you've been doing this, ACMPR, MMR, you've had all that. You've got your own strains, I guess, that work for you.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it must be a cost to this amount of cannabis.
Yeah, like there's no way, if I was a normal working person, there's no way I'd be able to afford it.
Right.
No way.
So you then obviously have your cannabis analyzed to understand how much THC is in your plants then to make these measurements, or are you guessing?
At times, I don't have a testing machine here. So we have sent stuff out for tests, but for the most part, it's a roundabout guess.
Okay.
What I know is I have used enough that are from companies that have lab tested products. There we go.
Yeah. Licensed producers, they're called now.
Yeah. Well, I still don't buy from them, but
okay.
Yeah. So I do know that's what like 2,500 milligrams is a starting dose.
Okay.
Depending upon how much I'm going down. So basically what I do with my methadone is I take it until I have a day where I can go 24 hours without taking it.
Okay.
Because then I do advise this to other people, but do it with your doctor's advice. So I wait until I can go a day without taking my methadone with no withdrawal whatsoever. So once I can go 24 hours and experience no withdrawals, I consider myself stable. So okay. I'm at a stable dose of methadone. Once I can do that, then I take a drop. So that's where I would go down half when I was up at larger numbers. Now I'll go down a milligram or two. And during that process of going down, if I didn't have edibles, I couldn't do it.
Okay.
It's impossible to do. With edibles, it was so easy. And again, every doctor I've had when I've gone through this process has either not believed me or just cautioned strongly against it.
Yeah.
But then I come back 2 weeks later and say, okay, you can take me down another 20. Well, I don't know if we would advise that. Well, if you don't, I'm just going to do it myself. So, well, how are you doing this? Are you using again? No, I'm using cannabis. And then you tell them how much and they're like, that's not safe. And so I think your suggestion was a good one. We need to have doctors who are aware of these things and can start bringing them to other doctors.
Well, the other thing about it, Marc, is that if you go to a doctor that's cannabis savvy, they may also say to you, you're doing something I've never done before. However, I'm aware of cannabis, and now you become a teacher to them, and they learn from you. They can help the next person with what they learn from you. You used the term RSO, Rick Simpson's oil?
Yeah.
So are you making your own Rick Simpson's oil?
Yeah, making my own and procuring my own from other growers.
Okay, because like I was saying, that's an awful lot of cannabis. So you must have to be concentrating it somehow. You must be getting the resin to extract that amount of cannabis out of a flower.
Yeah,
it's a lot of plants.
I grow indoor and outdoor.
Okay.
So I live on a farm out in the middle of nowhere, and I have my license split up into indoor and outdoor. So I have a couple greenhouses, I have some outdoor area to grow in, and I have a couple rooms going inside full time.
Right. All right, man.
But it does take a lot. There's no doubt about that. Like,
it's a full-time job for you, I imagine, growing these plants.
Yeah, 100%. It's literally all I do right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is an amazing story. So just to backtrack. So obviously an addict, did some hard drugs. You're off on the West Coast. When did you move to Manitoba?
Moved back to Manitoba the first time 2010.
Okay.
And when we moved back here, it was hilarious. Like this in one way, it's a good thing because it shows you how far Manitoba has come, but it also shows how far Manitoba lags behind. When I came out in 2010, probably 5 years before that, was going to jail and having a doctor say, "Oh, you're an addict? Here's something we can do for you." I get to Manitoba. Our doctor in BC writes us a 6-month script, tells us, get out there, find another clinic. Here's a 6-month script to tie you over. And when you get there, we'll just transfer you to another doctor. So we come out here. First off, only one pharmacy in all of southern Manitoba that carried methadone. So come out here, we have to travel out to this pharmacy every week to get our methadone. First, it was every day because you got to witness every day until you prove that you're okay. Then it's every week. And if you're not on assistance or you don't have health coverage, you're paying a $12 bottling fee and 30 cents for your methadone every day.
Yeah.
Like the methadone literally costs 30 cents, but you have to pay this $12 bottling fee out of your pocket every freaking day. It's insane. Anyways, so we come out here, we start looking for methadone clinics. There's 2 in all of Manitoba in 2010. 2 methadone clinics. One, you had to be a resident of Winnipeg. If you lived outside of Winnipeg, no go. The other one, waiting list. So we get put on the waiting list. Time goes by, we're at 5 months. My doctor finally says, I can't write you another script. You guys are going to be out of methadone in 30 days, and there's nothing I can do about it. Please send me a list of any doctors you know that even prescribe methadone, because at that time, Manitoba was using it as pain management. They were giving it to cancer patients instead of morphine.
Okay.
So we get him this list of doctors who prescribe methadone. He contacts them all directly and asks to just transfer our file. They all say no. So we have this deadline coming down. We're not going to be able to get our methadone at all. That's where we did the iboga.
Okay.
So then about 1.5 years later, I get a really good job offer out in Vancouver. Me and my wife pack up, move back to BC. We're in BC for about 6 months. All of a sudden, I get this phone call from my mom. She's like, "Oh, you got a phone call today. Guess who? Who? The methadone clinic." 2.5 years later.
Wow.
They're calling me to say, "Hey, we can take you now." I just laughed. My mom, even this old Christian lady, was like, she said, "Yeah, I just told them he'd be dead. He'd be dead if he was still here," and she hung up on them. Like, this is insane.
Yeah.
You're expecting a junkie who's living his day in 2-hour increments to wait 2.5 years to get help.
Yeah.
So then we were in BC for a while. We came back here, and then we came back. Same thing. We had to, then the one that served out of Winnipeg clients, I think it was Mine at the time it was called. The Mine Clinic, yeah. They could get us in right away, but we had to travel to Winnipeg every week to pick up our methadone because they had the doctor's office and the pharmacy in the same place.
Okay.
So every week we had to drive to Winnipeg, it was a nightmare. And then it was about a year and a half of doing that, I think, maybe a year of doing that I ended up really sick. I'd missed going in 2 days, so they cut me off. And this is the thing. They put you on it.
Yeah.
You miss a couple days, they cut you off. They don't care at all that they have sentenced you to the 6-month crazy withdrawal on this substance that's way worse than what you were on. And no care. They just cut you off, sometimes with no notice, no nothing. You go to the pharmacy to get your dose, and they're like, oh, sorry. Or if you piss hot, like if they find something else in your blood, maybe you eat a poppy seed bagel, you took some benzos, something, they find it in your blood. So you go in, you give your piss test for the week. The next week, you go to pick up your dose that you think is going to be there, and they say, sorry, you need to see your doctor next week. Or you need to see your doctor before he cut your script off. You need to go see him. Oh, when can I see him? Well, he wrote you an appointment for 3 weeks from now. Like, what? What do you think I'm going to do? I'm going to go get heroin. Like, just insane.
So your goal is to use cannabis. And how long have you been using cannabis then? Like you started it as a, like
my whole life,
your whole life
since 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
But as a medicine now, as a for the addictions issues and helping you to get off.
Going back, I've been using it as a strong assist to getting off the methadone for just over a year now. I'd say.
All right.
Yeah, it was just right around when my wife died, just before, just after that, I decided I need to be off of this for good. And I made the decision. It was actually like, I made a decision in my head that I would rather deal with possibly going back to heroin and having to deal with the withdrawal of heroin than ever going through this again. Like it's a life sentence that they don't tell you is a life sentence when they put you on it. And it's not a good medication. It doesn't make you feel good. It gives you all kinds of other issues. Like, I walk around looking like a junkie all the time. Like, even when I was in jail, you can tell when somebody comes on the range, or when you walk onto a range and you see everybody sitting at the tables, you can pick out the people on methadone, no problem.
Yeah.
Even if they haven't done any street drugs for months or years, they look like junkies. Their skin is pale. They have bags under their eyes. They look like junkies. I can go into the pharmacy, and I know when I'm sitting there waiting for my prescription to be filled, I know every person that comes in that's on methadone before they go to the methadone counter. You can see them when they're walking, methadone. Like, it is an obvious, you're still an addict.
Right.
You're just an addict to a legalized prescribed medication, which is why I don't understand why the programs that they're doing in Italy and Europe with proper pharmaceutical heroin maintenance, it just seems, even if they did it with morphine or like hydromorph, anything that is a short acting, that's like, it is much easier to taper down on heroin than it is on methadone. I'll just say that.
Right. So your goal is self-medicating yourself using cannabis. You want to be off methadone. Now, did I hear you say a year from now?
Yeah, I initially, because I was coming down so fast, I thought it was going to be 6 months and I'd be done. I didn't realize how hard it was going to get once you get to those lower doses. Mm-hmm. It is, it's a very powerful opiate. Like, it just stays in you forever. And like, once I got under 10 milligrams, and even now it took me, I think, probably 3 months to go from 6 to 5. Because every time I tried to come down to 5, I'd take my dose, I'd feel great. And all of a sudden, before bed, I wouldn't feel that good. It'd be about 12 hours in, I wouldn't feel that good. And I'd wake up in the middle of the night puking my guts out.
Okay. Just
from going down 1 milligram.
All right.
You know.
And how often do you dose yourself with cannabis then? You do the methadone once a day? I
do the methadone once a day. And now I smoke fairly regularly throughout the day. And then I take my edibles at night. A few hours, usually about 4 hours before bed. Then I pop my edibles. And that's the other thing is, I have never had regular sleep on methadone. It was just something I got used to. I thought that's just the way I was. I thought I was some kind of insomniac that didn't sleep, and I didn't realize that it was in a big part the methadone that was doing it to me. When I take a proper amount of cannabis, like THC and CBD, it's the only time I get a full 6 to 8 hours of sleep. So that's another big thing with me. And I might have a little bit of insomnia, but yeah, that's how I do it. So I take my methadone usually somewhere in between noon and 5, and then 4 hours before bed, I'll eat anywhere from 25 to 5,000 milligrams, and then I get a good sleep and I wake up feeling good.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time, man.
Yeah, good to chat to you. Hope to meet you in person someday.
So Kirk, first and foremost, thank you to Marc. You know, we've had a lot of personal stories on the podcast, and hopefully we'll get some more down the road, but you know, this is the definition of bearing your soul, warts and all, and he's done that for everyone. So Marc, you're a very brave guy. Thank you for that.
Well, what I didn't mention up front, Trevor, is this is his cannabis story. You know how we have the My Cannabis story that we encourage our listeners to send us 1 to 2 minutes? Well, Marc sent me a message very early in our podcasting experiences, asking to give us My Cannabis story, and I said, sure, send me 2 minutes. Well, he never sent it. But I reached out to him after the other 2 stories that you brought, thinking this would be a good one, and I think it blends well. So what I'd like to understand a little bit more, explain methadone. He goes on, he's not a fan of it.
Not a fan, no.
Involved in it. So tell me about methadone.
So methadone is a really long-acting opioid. Try not to use, opioid, pharmacists, we use a bunch of words interchangeably. So opioid, narcotic, morphine-like, we're all talking about the same thing. I think I use opioid more than anything, but in case I slip into one of those other terms, we're all talking about the same group of medications. So methadone, really long acting. So it has a variable half-life, up to 40 hours, but its average is 22. So honestly, only piece of math I was going to say, half-life is the only piece of math I'm going to do here. So half-life is the amount of time for half of the dose to leave your body. So methadone, it's about 22 hours. And then the math also says it takes 5 half-lives for something to completely leave your body. So if you multiply that out, it's about 5 days. So a dose of methadone takes about 5 days to completely leave your body. And we play around with the idea that methadone, once we have it dosed right, should have a fairly level amount in your body for somewhere between 2 and 3 days, 24 to 48 hours-ish. And that's what we like about it. The whole idea is to give you a low dose of an opioid so it keeps back the cravings for your fast-acting opioids. So your morphine, your oxycodone, your hydromorphone, and your heroin, they're fast acting. So they go in fast, they come out fast, and our understanding of addiction and cravings is the faster something leaves your body or faster something goes in and out, sort of the more addictive it is. So if we give you the idea is we give you a slow, long-acting opioid at a low dose, like a dose hopefully low enough that you don't feel euphoria, you don't feel high, but it stops the cravings. So, you dose this thing once a day, and then you can go on, in a perfect world, now you go on with a regular job, life, relationship, without having constantly worrying about when's my next hit. That's the short version.
So the concept of harm reduction is that we're basically trying to modulate somebody's cravings to a controlled substance.
Yeah. Yes. And again, it is harm reduction. Now, Marc is not the first one who was surprised that the whole idea behind methadone is not to necessarily get you down to zero opioids. And most methadone doctors, practitioners will go over this with people at the beginning, but there's a lot to go over at the beginning. But it's harm reduction. So hopefully, there's all sorts of problems with using, we'll call them quote unquote street drugs, everything from, were they altered to sharing needles. There's, a bunch of problems with using street drugs, and the idea is methadone is safer, not 100% safe, but safer. And since it's once a day, again, you dose once a day and then hopefully don't have to worry about it the rest of the day. That's kind of the idea behind it. And again, the methadone idea is they're not in a big hurry necessarily to get you off of opioids altogether. That's not usually the goal. The goal is getting you your life back, getting you employed, getting you housed, getting you have a stable relationship. Maybe get your kids back, all the things, all the sort of safety nets, get those all working first. And then, if everything is, then maybe considering going down to nothing. But the idea behind the methadone program is not necessarily to get you off of opioids altogether.
Right. What I like about the cannabis component in here is how cannabis is helping him. I got to tell you, though, the doses that he's talking about taking in cannabis are incredibly high. Like I at some point in the conversation, I actually asked them to qualify it to actually, did I hear him correctly? He did say 2,500 grams or milligrams of cannabis.
Milligrams. And just to help people put it in context, remind us again, Kirk, if I was to go down to the Tweed store and buy an edible, how many milligrams is supposed to be in one gummy?
10 milligrams.
Yeah.
I mean, the 30 milligrams that you made in those gummies, laid you out.
Yeah.
And
and we're talking hundreds of times higher than that.
So again, I'm not saying that this is not Marc's experience, but as a pharmacist, I think I agree. We should throw out there. We are not advocating that everybody on opioids immediately go to thousands of milligrams of cannabis to get them off. We're highlighting one guy's experience.
This is one guy's experience, yes. But again, what it does, though, it does go back to episode 69, where we learned that cannabis is helping people to come off benzos, all sorts of medications. I mean, the study suggests that if the government was to fund cannabis as medicine, well, you'd probably save dollars as a government with pharmacare products. I mean, let's get away from the stigma and start looking how cannabis can help. That's why I wanted to bring this story, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to throw in a couple other sort of caveats, and you feel free to jump in here. I'm not really trying to defend methadone, but because most people out there haven't had anything to do with the methadone program, methadone isn't perfect by any stretch, but the big problems, we'll call it problems with opioids. In one way, opioids are, I know it's going to sound counterintuitive, they are relatively safe. We have cancer patients and other people who are literally on opioids, large doses, for years. And it's also counterintuitive, but if you had a safe supply of heroin, it's not really any more dangerous to be on heroin than it is to be on morphine. I'm going to qualify that, don't take my license. The heroin is not inherently dangerous. Methadone isn't inherently dangerous. The problems, as I see it, with opioids is they tend to be addictive. That's not the end of the world. No one wants to be addicted, but being addicted to something is not necessarily life-threatening, but they tend to be addictive, and that can lead to some bad behaviors. If I can't get my fix, I might be now tempted to steal to get the money to get my fix is, one of the things that always comes up. And then the other problem with the opioids is their overdose potential. Like even people who have been using opioids at huge doses for many years are at risk of accidentally taking too much, and then they die. And that's obviously a problem. But so those are kind of the biggish problems with opioids. And methadone is good at reducing those. Is it perfect? No, nothing's perfect. Like, for example, I was just rereading some of my methadone notes from the last course I took. And I'm not trying to say this makes methadone bad, but it's just interesting. It is difficult when you're starting people out on methadone, and why we often do it in hospital, because during those first 2 weeks, the chances of somebody overdosing when they're starting on methadone is like 6 times higher than if they were just using heroin. So it's tricky to do properly. But if we get, Marc is not the only person out there who said, methadone isn't for me, but I just want to defend it a little bit. There is a lot of people who are alive and living relatively normal lives on methadone, and they're not, going back to their street drug of choice and their street life and living rough, as you were saying.
Yeah. What I find interesting in society is what we allow to happen and what we accept. I know people that don't get their coffee in the morning or miss a couple of days of coffee will get a splitting headache. I know people who are addicted to this thing that, what is it? Oh, cigarettes that we used to promote, or we used to, people are addicted to cigarettes. I know that alcohol, our premier is trying to sell alcohol in the corner stores, so we have all these things that society allows us to be addicted to. And we even get coffee cups, that says addictive things on our coffee cups. And but we talk about opiates, and we're allowing people to die in the streets because our government, the voters, whoever they are, won't recognize the fact that we have a crisis. We got more people dying of opioid overdoses right now than COVID, right? And it's, so I like Marc's idea, I know that heroin is a little weaker to the methadone. I understand methadone lasts longer, so blah, blah, et cetera, but if we just allowed people to access clean narcotics, clean places, and allowed them to have their addictions like we allow them to have their coffee, as long as they're functioning, I think harm reduction should go that route. I think we need to declassify all these drugs and make them acceptable, like cannabis. Gee whiz, man. In the last 3 years, cannabis is much more acceptable. People are getting Christmas gifts. So why can't we just open up the narcotics and fentanyl and just open it all up and just clean it up so that we're not selling dirty shit on the street and letting people die in the street. I mean, this is what I think. And now cannabis, we're a cannabis store, podcast. So, but I think cannabis is in there again, right? If somebody was to go get their clean heroin with a few grams of cannabis, who's to say? The studies we're reading would suggest that it would be cheaper, less deaths, and people would be happier, right? So I think if we can do anything from this story is I think harm reduction programs are fantastic. But why don't we just get rid of these illegal drugs and regulate them like they are with cannabis and allow people access to clean drugs? I think that would be...
No, and that's a good point. I don't know if I'd go as far as, legalize everything, but one of the takeaways I took from this story is I think we tend to other people with addictions, people with substance use disorders too much.
Sure we do.
Marc is a person. Marc has had experiences. Marc doesn't want to die of an overdose on the street. Marc wants to keep on living on his acreage and play with his dogs. And, he misses his wife who's passed away. I think, without sounding too much like a bleeding heart, I think one of the big things is to humanize people. Like you said, no one freaks out at somebody having a coffee addiction, true, but we don't even really freak out about the functional alcoholics. Who around us doesn't know the functional alcoholic?
And we're in healthcare, man. We're surrounded by functional alcoholics.
Yeah, so we don't demonize them. it's the othering, and I don't know. I'm not smart enough to say I know the answer, but a lot of the opposition I see to, like you said, be it safe injection sites or come get your they were talking literally in Vancouver about having almost a vending machine where you could buy strips of hydromorphone. And again, I don't know which of these is the right way to go, but we should, these people's lives are worth living, worth saving. We should definitely be doing something.
Yeah. Now think about 6 years ago. Would you have thought that the government would allow us to buy 10 milligram cookies of cannabis?
Oh, hell no. I think I've said this before.
I really thought, well, because Justin Trudeau was in third place before he won his election, whatever it was, 2015 or something. This was something that he put on the platform to get a little bit of traction. I'm going to legalize pot. Go, sure, whatever, Justin. And he freaking won. Honestly, I bet in his biography later, he's going to admit, I didn't think I'd win. I just throw that on to get a little bit of press. And suddenly he won and had to do something about it. It was way out in left field.
I don't think so. I think he basically just carried on what his papa was going to do. I mean, Papa Trudeau was trying to legalize pot with Jimmy Carter back in the day. So I think Justin just promised his dad that when I become prime minister, I'll legalize pot for you. Because we know that Pierre Trudeau was smoking. We know that Mama Trudeau was smoking.
Mr. Trudeau, you obviously have to come on our podcast and tell Kirk which one of us was right.
Yeah, and by the way, I thought my job was to be the bleeding heart.
Yeah, I know. Every so often.
You're the card-carrying conservative wearing the ties, buddy. What are you doing?
I am, but I still, I'm crossing over. Yeah, it's still the whole. As soon as you start seeing, them as people who with substance use disorders as people, then it makes more sense to help them.
Yes, I agree. Again, I think this was a good blend. It's part of the series in the last little bit of opioids. Okay, so we're ReeferMEDness, the podcast. I'm Kirk Nyquist, I'm the nurse.
I'm Trevor Shufeld, I'm the pharmacist.
That was your segue, yeah. And I guess I want to let people know that our webpage is up. I'm a little behind on it. I'm sorry, my connection up here at the nursing station isn't as strong as it should be. I'll get up to it. I noticed the other day, Trevor, we're on Spotify, we're on SoundCloud, iTunes, Stitcher. We're out there, people. You can find us. Whatever you're listening to us on, give us a review. Tell a friend. This is episode 70. 70,
wow,
man.
We're getting up there.
Yeah. So
Marc picked some music for Renee to track down. It was a Manitoban band whose name escapes me, but he did pick on.
Yeah.
All right. So Marc had a request, and he decided he wanted to hear something from a Manitoba band called Propagandy. He wanted to hear something from How to Clean Everything. And the song that I've chosen is I Want You to Want Me. A different kind of version of it. But anyway, thank you.
Like the show? Let us know. We're ReeferMEDness on Instagram and Facebook, at ReeferMEDness on Twitter, or head over to the website at reefermed.ca to find out what we're all about and what's coming up next. Talk to you later.
I want you to want me. I need you to need me. I'm begging you to beg me. And I want you now. Yeah, I want you to want me. I need you to need me. I'm begging you to beg me. I'd love you to love me. Buy a brand new shirt, put on brand new shoes. I would do anything if you say that you love me. Yeah. Didn't I see you crying? She don't eat bacon. She never killed a sweet little innocent piggy to get bacon. She's one of them vegans. She's a sweet, loving, sweet talking, lovable vegan. And that's all right.
I just find it interesting what society accepts. You know, I got a cramp. Oh shit. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Oh wait, I'll go back.
Some methadone would help that.
Yeah, no. What? Sorry, Renee. I just got a cramp in my leg.